What does the adaptation of Jaws teach us about the importance of likeable characters?
Steven Spielberg's Jaws, released in June of 1975, was arguably the template for the summer blockbuster we know today. Jaws had a notoriously troubled shoot with a mechanical shark that refused to work, and that left the crew having to constantly come up with new and interesting ways to represent the threat without actually showing you the shark itself. Conversely, this focus on lurking presence rather than screen-devouring menace created a far more abiding monster to thrill and terrify audiences than any number of perfectly formed, perfectly created CGI beasties that we see on our average summer trips to the movies today. It has a John Williams score that can be recognised the world over simply by humming the first two bass notes. Nerd. With a simple hook, Shark terrorises small island community. Made more juicy by the fact that the local businesses, and by extension the mayor who is beholden to them, do not want to acknowledge said shark until it's chomping on their children, it gave us the perfect opening and escalation. The third act is set entirely in the confines of a fishing boat and places the island's sheriff, Brody, played by a magnificently constrained Roy Scheider, next to Richard Dreyfuss's nervy, smart-mouthed shark expert, Hooper, and Robert Shaw's gruff, coarse, and possibly insane fisherman Quint. It's Quint's boat, Brody's quest, and Hooper's speciality, so the pressure keeps changing on who clashes with whom.
That's a 20-footer.
25.
Now, in the lexicon of movies with a body count, does likability equal survivability? Is it harder to build up a bond between the audience and unlikable characters unless there is a direct point of identification? If so, the audience and the director may be inclined to see such characters as spares who can be killed off to increase tension. In the adaptation of Jaws from the book by Peter Benchley, specific choices were made about likeable and dislikable behaviour in particular characters. Brody is the hard put upon police chief and intentional everyman, whose struggles we are supposed to sympathise with, and surprisingly, in the book, his wife Ellen is less than supportive of her husband. So as unthinkable to fans of the movie as this may sound, Ellen and Hooper engage in a brief affair. Brody at first suspects this breach of trust, which causes obvious tension, culminating in the sheriff trying to strangle Hooper while they're out on the boat. Hooper goes down in the cage, as in the film, but unlike Spielberg's version, he's actually killed when the shark attacks. To an extent, actions in the book were dictated by outside influences. Allegedly, Benchley's editor did not want wholesome marital sex between Ellen and Brody, and so the affair was forcibly inserted to make the encounter more titillating.
In other words, executive meddling was going on even in those days and in the world of literature.
Spielberg found the characters unlikable and decided to make some changes for his adaptation. In the film, there is no liaison between Hooper and Ellen, although a shade of it remains in the scene where Hooper invites himself in and starts to eat Brody's dinner. The interaction between the three of them, mostly unspoken, is humorous in a wry way, and underlines the slight tension but not outright conflict between Hooper and Brody later on. This is explored more when Brody's loyalties are torn, either between Hooper's perspective and the mayor's, or Hooper's knowledge and Quint's experience. For not cuckolding Brody, Hooper is rewarded with his life and swims away from the shark cage incident relatively unscathed, although he does spend most of the final act hiding under a rock so that Brody can become the hero that we want him to be. I mean, you could argue that Ellen's behaviour is just as bad as Hooper's, and she doesn't die.
She doesn't get in the boat with a shark.
Very good point.
So hypothetically, if in the movie Hooper had crossed that cultural line, he might have been less likeable to a wider audience. Now, in your classic monster movie scenario, the dislikable characters are there to be killed in satisfying ways. If it's a cautionary tale, they will be the ones doing something foolish, like going somewhere they shouldn't. And in horror, this extends to drinking, drugs, and sex. We need these to identify the things that these characters would do that we would not, at least not in that situation. We would in this scenario be safe, so the likability is intertwined with this judgment of their action.
Quint is definitely where he should be. He's a fisherman and he's pledged to hunt the shark for the island. Hooper is arguably where he should be. He's the shark expert and he's in need of some more practical experience. And of the three of them, ocean-fearing Brody is the one going somewhere he shouldn't. But he's on a quest to protect Amity, and by extension his family, from the shark, and also to make amends for his inaction in allowing a young boy to be killed by Jaws.
Hooper is a funny, smart guy who we see get teased by meatheads, which most of us can relate to. But he's just irritating enough that we might want to see him get eaten by a shark. We'd just feel bad about it afterwards. Brody is a serious family man and he's just trying to do the right thing under enormous pressure, so we like him for his dedication, and his death would feel like a tragedy. Now Quint is rude to everyone. He's overly macho and posturing, he says weird things out of turn, he orders the other two around, and he actively sabotages the mission when it seems like they're going to turn around. He's Captain Ahab, with that same doomed obsession with the fish that ruined his life. However, he's also entertaining and supremely watchable. Now we'll talk later about the difference between likeable and engaging characters. Trust me, Quint is the latter. But the unlikable Quint is killed for another reason, and that is the stripping away of safety barriers. Quint is the professional shark killer. He should know what to do, and yet Jaws munches him down like an old Twix, leaving our landlubber hero with far less to call upon. And Hooper, hiding under his rock at the bottom of the sea, may as well be dead. These two were the muscle and the brains, and them being taken away leaves our hero with only his instincts and a primal battle between man and beast, in which science is employed to win the day. So let's define the criteria for survivability together. For that, we're going to ask the class, that's you guys, what makes a character likeable to you to the point where you're actively rooting for their survival? Give us some examples and we'll be reading the best and most interesting next time.
Further reading. First up, go and see the movie again and look closely to see which characters are particularly likeable to you. Then track down The Shark Is Still Working, a documentary on the production and influence of the film created over many years from archival footage and interviews. It's an extra on the Blu-ray which should be in every one of your collections. If you'd like to hear us talk about another Spielberg monster classic, check out the Digital Drift podcast number 65, in which we discuss Jurassic Park for 3 hours. Remember to rate this video and subscribe. And you can leave your responses to this week's question in the comments, on Facebook, on the forum, or on Twitter using the hashtag #SchoolofMovies.
Okay, so since this is our first episode, we have no last week's question responses from you guys. So we asked you instead on Twitter, Facebook forum, what is the most effective movie monster to you, and why is that? So here are your best responses. Okay, so the 3 clear winners with roughly equal voting are The Predator, The Alien, and The Thing. We don't really need to tell you why those guys are terrifying, we all know that. American Psycho, the ballerina from Cabin in the Woods,
Brundlefly, the clown from It, the graboids from Tremors.
I've always called them just Tremors, but graboids, that's fine. Pazuzu from The Exorcist, Nurse Ratched, the Terror Dogs from Ghostbusters, yes. David says, not really a movie, but the Weeping Angel from the Doctor Who episode Blink, yes. Gavin Green here talks about the creatures in The Descent. It's chilling the amount of detail he goes into. He really thought about this one a lot, which is great. We encourage that.
And you can see that answer on the forum.
Keddy, Doug Jones is not a monster, though, as you say, he often plays them hellish effective. Brett gets all metaphysical and posits that what if humans are the monsters? Matt suggests anything that's not just a CGI creation because you know the actors were all just looking at a tennis ball on a stick. Yes.
We're looking at a tennis ball over here right now.
Matt also came up with the tweet of the week, which is a link to the movie, it's a 10-minute short, The Horribly Slow Murderer with the Extremely Inefficient Weapon, which turns out to be a spoon. This movie starts off creepy, and then it becomes ridiculous, and then after a while it starts to rotate right the way back down to terrifying. And that's like, ha. And finally, two of our favourites.
The Babadook.
And It Follows. Doesn't have a name, we're just calling it It Follows. Stay tuned for those two. Some of the best horror we've seen in ages. Babadook's more of a lurking presence, It Follows are more of a stalking presence. Both of them have very strong psychological aspect to them. It's psych horror. Now, if you go to the forum at Digital Drift, you're going to find a thread where you can post about the question of the week, but you'll also find a thread where you can post ideas for what you'd like us to talk about. You can name a movie, but there's a catch. You have to give us a really interesting theme or topic with which to explore said movie. You can't just go, talk about Rocky. What about Rocky? So you tell us. We aren't going to do everything that everyone says. There'd be no time to do them all. But the really interesting ones will go, ooh, noted. So go do that. And that's it for us this week. See you next class.
class.
School's out.